All right. The presupposition that decay rates are uniform is wrong. We're looking at age dating methods, radiometric dating especially. So many presuppositions that they actually cause the dating method to be wholly unreliable. And even when the things come up, the results come up that support what the scientist wants to conclude, that's still a belief system. It's deductive reasoning, not inductive, where you let your observations draw your conclusions instead of your own preconceptions. A belief system. Let's look for presupposition that decay rates are uniform is wrong. Presupposition that decay rates are uniform is wrong, regardless of whether or not the original mineral was set to reach a certain finite time at the instant of its creation. We still could not know for certainty what this original condition had been, since we cannot know what extent the rate of decay had varied since that time. Were you there? No. Uniformitarianism has so many times of exception. There are small local catastrophic events happen all around the world, in all areas of science. Worldwide catastrophism can't be ruled out just because I don't see it today. It is possible, of course, to measure or estimate the decay rates as they exist now for each of the radioactive series and for each stage in the series, and this has been done. As we have seen, considerable questions still exist as to the proper value for many of these decay constants. But the values of all the important ones are known to at least the right order of magnitude. And of course, the claim is made that these decay rates never change, and that is, therefore, legitimate to use them in the computation of ages. But that's a presumption that you can't prove, and it's simply not true because the evidence that they have changed is right there. When you have nearly 100% failure rate, evolutionists claim that all applicable extremes of temperature, pressure, physical state, chemical combinations, etc. have been applied to the radioactive elements without any significant indication of resulting changes in the disintegration constants. That's pure fantasy. It is falsely claimed that no past change in terrestrial environments, as conceived according to uniformitarian principles, could have been outside the scope of these laboratory studies. Really. It is therefore also falsely maintained that the decay rates have never changed inside your little laboratory. There is nothing basically inviolable about these decay rates. However, this is proved by the fact that it has been found possible to change some of them at least slightly in the laboratories. If you can do it in the lab, you can do it a whole bunch more outside. External radiation exposure during creation and right after the flood provided a window of vastly greater external radiation, leading to immensely greater deterioration of parent elements. Also, juxtaposition of greater amounts of parent elements in the past equals a greater deterioration. Experiments with decay of two artificial isotopes thought to be the most sensitive to change in atomic structure, beryllium-7 and an excited state of technetium-99, have shown that the decay rate can be changed, but the change is extremely small. And on a larger scale, maybe it'll be larger. Hello? These changes were due to changes in the chemical compounds of which the elements were a part, but similar small changes in certain decay rates can be affected by pressure. Dr. Patton says, there has been in recent years the horrible realization that radioactive decay rates are not as constant as previously thought, nor are they immune to environmental influences. And this could mean that the atomic clocks are reset during some global disaster and events which brought the Mesozoic to a close may not be 65 million years ago, but rather within the age and memory of man. Frederick Juneman, FAIC, Industrial Research and Development. So the agreement of data from different methods does not verify those results. Just because you throw dice up in the air a billion times, you say, well, we got it to do it 10 times in a row, 12, number 12. That doesn't verify that that can be done every time, because you just tried millions of times. Uranium and thorium are often found together in the same mineral. For example, although calculations of the age are usually discordant, they usually agree. They occasionally agree. With respect even to the case of a mineral containing only uranium, Brown says, now there are 4 different ways we can compute the age of the mineral, namely from the ratio of lead-206 to uranium-238, the ratio of lead-207 to U-235, the ratio of lead-206 to lead-207, and the ratio of helium to uranium. Ideally, all 4 of these ages should agree, because it's in the same rock, and no estimate can be considered trustworthy unless at least 2 independent methods, 2 of the first 3 here, agree. But unfortunately, complicating factors often produce discrepancies in evaluating a given sample. So you have 2 errors that agree. The age of the solar system, by Harrison Brown. There is even more commonly disagreement between uranium and thorium ages, but again, there is occasional agreement. As more and more evidence was gathered, the lead age method began to carry conviction. There could be little doubt when pure thorium and minerals associated in the same rocks with pure uranium materials gave the same absolute age. Hey, yeah, might have been a mistake. There are now known even a few cases where there is agreement between ages obtained by the lead method, the rubidium method, and or the potassium method. There's good reason to present the state of progress at this time, since the newer techniques have already provided an indication of the usefulness and simplicity in providing potassium, argon, rubidium, strontium ages that agree for the rocks for which the 2 indicated uranium lead ages disagree. How do you do that? So the rock has different ages according to the kind of test you take. Oh, really? These measurements have also shown that rubidium, strontium, potassium, argon ages can be made to agree with concordant uranium lead ages by a suitable choice of half-lives for potassium-40 and rubidium-87. It's like having a gambling table that's fixed. The values so found lie within the large range of values for these 2 constants, which have been obtained by direct laboratory counting experiments. Wow. But this kind of agreement is exactly what is to be expected on the basis of our deductions as to the past history of the radioactive elements, as originally created and as possible, subject to the creation and deluge periods, to accelerate the rates of decay. You see? If catastrophic events did this, then you would have these results. But to force these things to agree, that's another story. That's not scientific. If any of the radiogenic elements were actually and truly created at the beginning, as seems eminently reasonable and plausible, it is most consistent with the perfect, very good character of the original creation to infer that these different radiogenic elements were created in homologous quantities. That is, if 2 or more such elements were to be included in the same created mineral or group of minerals, their relative amounts would have been the same as their relative rates of origin by radioactive disintegration from their respective parents. Furthermore, it is most likely that if these parents were also created in juxtaposition in the same minerals with them, they and each member of their respective decay chains would have been created and present in their so-called equilibrium amounts, as now governed by the individual decay rates of the members in the chain. So much for that. The biblical account, then, is plausible. Skeptics will, of course, be immediately inclined to discard such a deduction as quite unscientific. There you go. In virtue of its being, by its very nature, unverifiable scientifically. That's true, because you're not there. But it's a plausible example until proved otherwise. And of course, this is true to a degree, since no human experimenter can duplicate or even study processes of creation which are no longer going on. But as a matter of fact, the assumption of uniformity is equally unverifiable scientifically as far as past history is concerned too. It is only uniformitarian presupposition that decides the assumption of uniformity to be more reasonable than that of original creation. Which do you believe? Okay, that's the one that's right. But maybe you ought to rule out the one that you don't believe in, just to be honest. The writers strongly denied that it is unscientific to postulate a primeval and genuine creation. The two great universal principles of thermodynamics, energy conservation and deterioration, inexorably witness to the scientific necessity of original creation. Nor is it unscientific to accept the biblical revelation, verified as it has been in countless ways, especially by the testimony of the Lord Jesus Christ himself as a true and reliable record of that which man cannot discover without such revelation, namely the events and the order of creation. Now, if you go with the biblical account, every time it looks plausible. You can't prove it because we weren't there, but it can't be ruled out. More plausible than evolution. All this leads to the conclusion that if it had been possible to make a radioactive time estimate for these minerals immediately after their creation by the same methods as are now in use, they would have indicated some finite age for the Earth, and this age, whatever it may have been, would have been the same for each of the different radiogenic elements in the mineral association. In other words, all the skewed events based on the assumption of evolution would have rung true and proved out a recent creation with a different set of possibilities because of the ice canopy over the Earth that created the worldwide flood and thereafter the single worldwide ice age. This is the most reasonable conclusion possible on the assumption of a genuine primeval creation as recorded in Genesis. Consider also the probable effect of the relative rates of radioactivity on the different elements during times when the environment was more radioactive than at present, such as on the first day of creation week and during the period of the deluge. Each element, of course, has at present a definite value for its half-life or rate of disintegration. At present, whatever may be the fundamental nature and cause of these respective decay processes, it is likely that each would be affected roughly proportionately by any environmental factor potent enough to affect them all, at all. For example, if the higher incidence of cosmic radiation during any period were such as to have any, say, doubled the rate of decay of uranium into lead, it is most probable that it would have approximately doubled the rate of decay of thorium and then of rubidium and of other radioactive elements. And when you apply this, the reasoning, the plausibility of creation in the Bible comes out more and more. Each rate would have been increased by a factor of the same order of magnitude, since each was subject to the same constant incidence of worldwide radiant energy, like cosmic radiation. And this, of course, means that if the particular minerals were left undisturbed, they would continue to yield roughly accordant ages, and though these ages would have now be apparently higher than they appeared at the time of creation. Similarly, during the flood period, each decay rate would have been speeded up in the same ratio so that each individual element would continue to give accordant ages. Finally, at the present date, still assuming this to be one of the relatively rare cases where the minerals have remained comparatively undisturbed through all the vicissitudes of geomorphic history, the suite of minerals would still give accordant ages. But the age so indicated would obviously be much greater than the true age of such since it is created. The fact that two or more apparently independent age estimates agree proves that the computations are valid and the age correct. This result is to be expected regardless of whether or not the decay rates had changed in the past, and therefore it proves nothing except that the mineral order under examination had probably not been disturbed and its component parts segregated since its original formation. Therefore, radioactivity age estimates cannot legitimately be used to proof of the age of the Earth or any formation in it. And we're done. Actually, we're not done.